Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C., and over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the U.S. and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Taiwan says it will not agree to making 50% of its semiconductors in the United States as Washington pressures Taipei to produce more chips on American soil. At least 69 people die after a powerful earthquake struck off the coast of a central Philippine island province. Authorities deploy Army troops, police, and civilian volunteers to carry out search for survivors. The UN's nuclear watchdog says the Russia-occupied nuclear facility in Ukraine faces no immediate danger due to power loss if backup generators continue running. This comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described the situation at the plant as critical. European leaders meet in Copenhagen to discuss proposals for a drone wall to protect the continent, just days after alleged Russian drones violated airspace of several countries in the region. And transport services in Greece grind to a halt as workers and students join a 24-hour strike against plans by the conservative government to introduce a 13-hour workday. We begin here in Washington, where the U.S. government has officially shut down for the first time in nearly 7 years. This comes after a deeply divided Congress failed to reach an agreement on funding, leaving the government without the money it needs to operate and creating widespread uncertainty about what happens next. President Trump was unable to broker a deal between Democrats and Republicans despite multiple meetings with congressional leaders.
They are shutting it down. We're not shutting it down. We don't want it to shut down because we have the greatest period of time ever. I told you, we have $17 trillion being invested, so the last person that wants it shut down is us. Now, with that being said, we can do things during the shutdown that are irreversible, that are bad for them and irreversible by them, like cutting vast numbers of people out, cutting things that they like, cutting programs that they like.
Now, the wedge issue involves deep disagreements over health care, with Democrats demanding extensions to subsidies and tax credits set to expire at the end of the year. They argue they are, in fact, crucial for millions of Americans facing rising health care premiums. They're also arguing people will face rising premiums as a result of steep cuts to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid.
We're ready, we're willing and able to find a bipartisan path forward to fund the government in a way that actually meets the needs of the American people in terms of their health, their safety, and their economic well-being. But here's what we're not going to do. We're not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people. Not now, not ever.
Meanwhile, Republicans introduced a short-term stopgap measure that would have kept the government running for 7 weeks, but both bills failed to pass in the Senate. Republicans refused to reopen the debate on Medicaid cuts and have encouraged the president to stay away from any compromise.
The House has passed a clean, nonpartisan, continuing resolution to fund the government until November the 21st. The president is ready to sign it. But Senate Democrats, they're standing in the way.
And as the shutdown became official, the blame game has now started. Democrats are accusing Republicans of failing to govern, with former Vice President Kamala Harris stating that Republicans who control the White House, the House, and the Senate bear full responsibility. Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand urged Republicans to come to the table and put American families before billionaires. And at the same time, Republicans turned the finger back on Democrats, with Speaker Mike Johnson posting that Democrats had, in his words, voted to close the government. Now, this marks the 21st shutdown since 1977, but unlike some earlier shutdowns, this one could prove far more disruptive since no signs of compromise are emerging. In fact, during the last shutdown in 2018, during Trump's first term, which lasted a record 35 days, many federal workers turned to food banks and some even called in sick because they could not afford essential services. And today, as many as 750,000 federal workers face furloughs. The shutdown is also expected to impact air travel, as thousands of aviation staff may be furloughed and others likely to be required to work without pay. Roughly 2 million troops could also be forced to work without pay, including hundreds of members of the National Guard that Donald Trump has deployed to U.S. cities, including Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Portland. At the Department of Health and Human Services, about 41% of employees will be furloughed, and even America's tourism industry could be hit, as national parks, museums, and even the Statue of Liberty might face closures. However, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid will continue to be distributed, but the economic fallout of a prolonged shutdown could be felt nationwide, with households struggling, services halted, and political divisions hardening even further. And as the markets brace for impact and millions of Americans wonder how long they will go without pay, all eyes turn to Washington to see which side blinks first in this high-stakes game of chicken. And now to Quantico, Virginia, where the president delivered an address to top U.S. military brass that placed new emphasis on the role of the armed forces inside the country. The sudden gathering, called at short notice, drew admirals and generals from around the world and fueled speculation even before the president stepped on stage. However, after President Trump took over, the message was clear. The U.S. military should prepare for what he described as an enemy within. He argued that America faces domestic unrest and crime that should be treated with the seriousness of a foreign war. In fact, he even proposed using American cities, particularly those under Democratic leadership, as training ground for federal forces.
We have many cities in great shape, too, by the way. I want you to know that. But it seems that the ones that are run by the radical left Democrats, what they've done to San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, they're very unsafe places, and we're going to straighten them out one by one. And this is going to be a major part for some of the people in this room. That's a war, too. It's a war from within.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also spoke, declaring an end to woke culture inside the Pentagon, and announced that combat roles will now require gender-neutral or male-level standards for physical fitness. His comments set the stage for President Trump's broader focus on reshaping military culture and priorities.
Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test.
And the president's speech wasn't confined to just domestic issues. He also highlighted his involvement in Middle East diplomacy, claiming that a ceasefire in Gaza could be reached as soon under his plan, which he said has been accepted by Israel and Arab states, but still requires agreement from Hamas.
But we have just about everybody. We have one signature that we need, and that signature will pay in hell if they don't sign. I hope they sign for their own good, and we create something really great.
And bizarrely, the president once again raised the issue of the Nobel Peace Prize, insisting that his record makes him deserving, but lamenting that recognition is unlikely. He described the lack of acknowledgement as an insult to the United States.
Will you get the Nobel Prize? Absolutely not. They'll give it to some guy that didn't do a damn thing. They'll give it to a guy that wrote a book about the mind of Donald Trump and what it took to solve the wars. And he'll get the Nobel Prize will go to a writer.
And speaking about Ukraine, President Trump expressed disappointment in Russian President Vladimir Putin, criticizing the length of the war and suggesting Russia should have concluded the conflict quickly. He maintained that U.S. diplomacy under his leadership could still bring the fighting to an end, though no breakthrough has yet to be achieved.
Disappointed in President Putin. I thought he would get this thing over with. He should have had that war done in a week. And I said to him, you don't look good. You're 4 years fighting a war that should have taken a week. Are you a paper tiger? And it's a shame, but I think eventually we'll get that one done.
And of course, the president could not conclude his speech without attacking his predecessor, Joe Biden, blaming the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan for emboldening Russia. He contrasted Biden's presidency with his own, portraying himself as a leader who restored global respect back to the United States.
We're witnessing the triumphant return of peace through strength. We have great peace through strength. America is respected again as a country. We were not respected with Biden. They looked at him falling downstairs every day. Every day the guy's falling downstairs. He said, "It's not our president. We can't have it." I'm very careful.
President Trump ended with emphasizing his vision for the U.S. military's future, a force focused less on political correctness and more on toughness, readiness, and domestic security. He even applauded efforts to rebrand the Pentagon as a Department of War, calling it a reaffirmation of America's purpose and pride. The president's overarching message was stark. The military's most important battles may no longer be foreign, but actually domestic. And now to South America, where Venezuela's National Assembly yesterday approved a cooperation treaty with Russia as tensions with the United States continue to escalate. The agreement voted on by the government coalition-controlled assembly is designed to strengthen relations in energy, defense, technology, and the economy, according to the Venezuelan news agency. However, the treaty, officially called the law approving the Treaty of Strategic Association and Cooperation between Venezuela and Russia, still requires promulgation by President Nicolas Maduro.
Apruebe y refrende.
To approve and countersign the agreement signed between the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, presided over by Nicolas Maduro, and the government of the Russian Federation, presided over by President Vladimir Putin, because it's the expression of the brotherhood, the expression of a different way in which the people and governments relate, the expression of the increasingly solid and persistent condition of friendship, brotherhood, and cooperation between the Russian Federation and the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
De la cada vez más sólida y persistente.
Now, the development comes amid heightened tensions within the region. In fact, earlier in September, the United States carried out 3 strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats in the southern Caribbean. And yesterday, President Trump increased his rhetoric, saying his administration was weighing options to attack drug cartels directly by land.
We'll see what happens with Venezuela. Venezuela has been very dangerous with drugs and with other things. We had a lot of drugs coming in through water. We call it water drugs, just a simple term. We don't have any boats on the water. There are no boats. There are no fishing boats. There are no anything. So we hit a number of boats. You probably saw that. And since we did that, we have absolutely no drugs coming into our country via water because it was lethal. And now we'll look at cartels. We're going to look very seriously at cartels coming by land.
Now, meanwhile, President Maduro was awarded an honorary doctorate in security issues from the Bolivarian Military University. Wearing a medal, a red beret, and a black tunic, Maduro received the degree in a ceremony attended by the Venezuelan defense minister and other senior military officials. And speaking after the award, the Venezuelan leader delivered a master class in which he defended Venezuela's response to the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean.
Cuando se me planteó
Why is the U.S. empire now launching its multifaceted plan against Venezuela with a worn-out false narrative? A false narrative already rejected by U.S. public opinion itself. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, with his indecency and so-called morality, has said that Venezuelan military bases are the epicenter of drug trafficking. As the constitutional commander-in-chief of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, I reject and repudiate Marco Rubio's statements.
con una falsa narrativa desgastada.
President Maduro declared that his government is on high alert and could declare a state of emergency to grant special powers in defense and security matters if U.S. aggression continues. He rejected U.S. accusations of him leading a cartel after Washington offered a $50 million reward for his arrest. And for now, the naval buildup in the region has seen 8 U.S. warships and a nuclear submarine dispatched to the southern Caribbean, along with 10 fighter jets sent to Puerto Rico. And the development is the largest since the December '89 invasion of Panama by U.S. forces. Meanwhile, Panama announced on Tuesday that the United States Marines will conduct a joint training exercise in its jungle with local security forces from October 9th to the 29th. And according to the Ministry of Public Security, the exercise aims to improve capabilities, enhance interoperability, and strengthen regional security. And about 50 U.S. Marines will travel to Panama aboard a U.S. transport plane. So as the standoff in the Caribbean grows, questions remain over whether these moves signal preparations for a larger confrontation that are still to come. A woman once hailed as the goddess of wealth has been unmasked as the mastermind of one of the biggest crypto scams in history. Jimin Qian has been convicted in London after pleading guilty to defrauding more than 128,000 victims in China and holding 61,000 bitcoins worth nearly $7 billion. What began as a dream of fortune turned into financial ruin for thousands as Qian built an empire of lies that spanned continents, luxury mansions, and fake identities until a 7-year global investigation finally brought her down. Here's our next report to tell you more.
It is being called one of the biggest crypto frauds in history. A scam so vast, it turned thousands of dreams into dust and billions of stolen dollars into digital smoke. In London, 47-year-old Jimin Qian has pleaded guilty to a crime that stunned investigators worldwide. She illegally acquired and held more than 61,000 bitcoins, a fraud of nearly $7 billion. Between 2014 and 2017, Qian ran a massive investment scheme in China. More than 128,000 victims were lured in, from business people to bankers, even members of the judiciary. Ordinary people poured their savings into promises of wealth. They knew little about her except the name she was given, the goddess of wealth. But the goddess was no giver. She was a taker. The Metropolitan Police revealed that Qian converted the stolen billions into Bitcoin, a move designed to hide the money trail. She then fled China using fake documents and entered the UK. After entering the UK, she began attempts to buy luxury properties to wash the stolen fortune. The trail eventually led to investigations across borders. The probe became a 7-year, multi-jurisdictional chase. Detectives described it as one of the most complex cases of its kind. And yet, after years of hiding in plain sight, Qian was finally caught.
By pleading guilty today, Ms. Zhang hopes to bring some comfort to investors who have waited since 2017 for compensation, and to reassure them that the significant rise in cryptocurrency values means there are more than sufficient funds available to repay their losses.
And here's where it gets interesting. Qian did not act alone. A Malaysian national admitted in court to laundering money on Qian's behalf. He pled guilty for entering into the arrangement on Tuesday. And before him, a takeaway worker had already been jailed for helping Qian move the funds. The worker, named Jian Wen, went from living above a restaurant to renting a multi-million-pound mansion in London. She even purchased 2 luxury properties in Dubai worth $650,000. But her empire collapsed when the police seized more than £300 million worth of Bitcoin from her accounts. Wen was sentenced to 6 years and 8 months in prison last year. Chinese media reports revealed just how devastating the scam was, with victims mostly elderly investing amounts ranging from thousands to millions of won. Friends encouraged friends, families convinced families until entire circles of trust collapsed into betrayal. Qian now awaits sentencing on November 10th. Her lawyer says she hopes the rising value of Bitcoin will ensure enough money remains to compensate her victims. But for thousands of families, compensation will never equal the years of trust broken and the lives changed. The goddess of wealth spun gold out of lies. But her digital kingdom has now turned to dust. Billions vanished, trust shattered, and what now remains is a trail of betrayal carved into a blockchain of history.
And now to a battle of epic proportion. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has canceled his Netflix subscription, and it's not over fees or shows you'd expect. The controversy is linked to the British animation director Hamish Steele. He recently called Charlie Kirk, the MAGA loyalist who was shot dead last month, a Nazi, sparking backlash online. We'll break down what led to this controversy, why it's drawing so much attention, and what it means for both Netflix and its viewers.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk has cancelled his Netflix subscription. His decision comes after a controversy involving Hamish Steele, a British animation director who mocked the killing of American conservative activist Charlie Kirk. The move has triggered headlines worldwide and intensified backlash against Netflix. Here is the full story. The controversy began in early September. Hamish Steele, the creator of Dead Endia and Netflix's animated show Dead End Paranormal Park, shared an expletive-laced post on Blue Sky, a social media platform. In that post, the London-based director referred to Charlie Kirk as a Nazi while mocking his death. Charlie Kirk, MAGA loyalist and a close ally of Donald Trump, was shot and killed in public on September the 10th. His funeral drew thousands of mourners, including Elon Musk and US President Donald Trump. Steele's remarks about Kirk resurfaced online weeks later. It sparked anger among conservatives and Musk's followers. The backlash grew louder when a clip from Steele's Netflix show, aimed at younger audiences, started circulating on Musk's social media platform X. Critics accused the series of promoting what they described as pro-trans messaging. The renewed attention led to screenshots of Steele's earlier post mocking Kirk also being widely shared again. Amid the uproar, former scientist for US Department of Energy Matt Von Swol announced that he had cancelled his Netflix subscription. In his post, Van Swol criticised the company for employing Steele. He accused Steele of celebrating Kirk's murder and pushing content that, in his words, promoted pro-trans views. He declared Netflix would never get a dime of his money again. It was to this post that Elon Musk replied. His response was just one word: same. That single reply confirmed that Musk too had cancelled his Netflix subscription in protest. Musk didn't stop there. He also called Steele a groomer, a term often used as an insult in debates over LGBTQ+ issues. The Tesla billionaire's remarks tie into his long-standing criticism of transgender rights and medical care. Musk has previously linked these issues to the transition of his own transgender daughter Vivian. He has described it as a result of woke mind virus. So far, neither Hamish Steele nor Netflix has issued an official statement on the controversy or Musk's decision. But with Musk's global platform, the debate has escalated, pulling the streaming giant into a wider cultural and political debate. Elon Musk's cancellation of Netflix adds fresh momentum to the backlash against Hamish Steele. As criticism mounts, the focus now turns to how Netflix will respond, or whether it will remain silent as the controversy continues to grow.
From all of us here at Firstpost America, we thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for tuning in.